They aimed to intimidate his family out of their home, but they never anticipated the father was skilled at unraveling terror networks. Garrett Lomax sensed trouble the instant he spotted 3 men climb out of a silver Ford Explorer and stride toward his driveway. They weren't law enforcement, yet they moved with an air that suggested they wanted everyone to believe they were, matching dark polos, tactical belts heavy with equipment, laminated badges pinned to their chests. From afar, it looked convincing enough to deceive anyone unaware. But Garrett wasn't just anyone. He'd spent nearly 2 decades identifying men who feigned authority while masking their true intentions. "Mr. Lomax," the tallest one called, his voice echoing across the quiet street, "we need to discuss that vehicle." Garrett had been clearing out the back of his truck, an old F-150 still carrying the faint scent of motor oil and sawdust. He paused, placed the tool crate down, and glanced at the men. Inside, his wife, Shanice, was helping their daughter, Leona, study for her biology exam, while their son, Bryson, was playing basketball with a neighbor's kid 2 houses away. Wiping his hands on a rag, Garrett asked calmly, "What about it?" "It violates neighborhood standards," the men replied. He was white, mid-40s, lean, with short-cropped hair. The badge on his chest read Neighborhood Compliance Authority in bold text, but Garrett noticed the seal was vague, no city crest, no county mark, just a generic tree and stars. "Since when does the HOA control what I drive?" Garrett asked, his tone steady, though inwardly, a switch had flipped. He'd heard this condescending tone before, meant to assert dominance. The men smirked. "We've had complaints. Trucks like that don't belong parked here, not in a place like this." His 2 companions snickered, one folding his arms, the other shifting his stance as if bracing for something. Garrett studied them silently. "Complaints from who?" he asked. "That's confidential," the leader said, stepping closer. "But you'll need to move it. Park it outside the subdivision if you want. Otherwise, there'll be consequences." Garrett nearly laughed but held back, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. Instead, he tilted his head slightly. "Consequences from who?" "Last I checked, compliance officers don't carry handcuffs or fake badges." The words hit harder than the men expected. The leader's smirk faltered briefly, irritation flickering in his eyes before he regained composure. "Careful, Mr. Lomax. We don't want to escalate this." Before Garrett could reply, the front door opened. Shanice stepped out, holding a mug of tea, her expression calm but her gaze sharp. "What's happening?" she asked, eyeing the strangers with a mix of wariness and disdain. "Ma'am, nothing to concern you," the leader said smoothly. "Just ensuring your family follows the rules. It's for everyone's safety." Shanice raised an eyebrow. "Safety from a pickup truck?" The 2 men behind the leader laughed outright, one muttering under his breath, "More like safety from him." Garrett caught it clearly. Every instinct urged him to react, but years of training kept him composed. He locked eyes with the men who'd spoken, his voice low and steady. "What did you just say?" The men shifted, uncomfortable, but didn't repeat it. The leader waved it off. "Enough, Mr. Lomax. You've been warned. We'll be back to check. Don't make us take further steps." They turned, as if delivering an official decree, climbed into their SUV, and drove off slowly, letting the tension linger. Garrett watched the Explorer vanish around the corner before speaking. "Shanice," he said quietly, "those men weren't from the HOA." "I figured," she replied, sipping her tea, though her hands trembled slightly. "So, who are they?" Garrett exhaled. Eyes fixed on the street. "Trouble. Organized trouble. They're not improvising, they've done this before." Bryson jogged up, basketball under his arm. "Dad, who were those guys?" "They looked like cops." "They weren't cops," Garrett said firmly. "I'll explain later. For now, you and your sister stay vigilant. Don't engage if they return." The weight of his words settled in. Shanice met his gaze, seeking reassurance he couldn't yet offer. His instincts warned this was only the start. What Garrett didn't know was that these men weren't done, they were probing, testing how far they could push his family. Dinner that night felt off. Usually, the Lomax home buzzed with chatter, Bryson talking basketball plays, Leona sharing science facts, Shanice gently chiding Garrett for over-seasoning the chicken. But tonight, words were clipped, heavy, as if everyone waited for Garrett to explain away the odd encounter. The kitchen light cast a soft glow over the table, plates half-eaten, forks scraping sporadically. Shanice's eyes drifted to the front window every few minutes. Garrett noticed each glance, though she tried to hide it. Finally, Leona broke the silence. "Daddy, why did those men act like they were in charge if they're not real officers?" Garrett set down his fork, expecting the question. "Because that's their tactic. People who want power pretend they already have it. It's their first move." Bryson frowned, twirling his fork in his mashed potatoes. "So they're fakes? Like, actual criminals?" "Not just fakes," Garrett replied. "They're organized. They play the part, act confident, and hope people don't question them. Most don't. Most back down." Shanice leaned forward, her tone sharp. "But they didn't come just to talk about the truck. You saw how they looked at you, like they'd already judged us." Garrett met her eyes. "I know. That's why we stay sharp." He didn't elaborate, but his family recognized the shift in his demeanor, his instincts speaking louder than words. For years, Garrett had been their steady anchor, calm no matter the storm. But Shanice remembered the missions he never discussed, the long stretches when his phone was off, returning with shadows in his eyes. She knew when his guard was up. Leona's fork clinked against her plate. "Will they come back?" "Yes," Garrett said plainly. "They will." Shanice shot him a look. "You sound certain." "I am," he said. "People like that don't test you once and leave. They're watching how we react, seeing how far they can push." The room fell quiet. Bryson shifted, uneasy with the conversation's weight. "What do we do?" "Just wait." Garrett leaned back, arms folded, voice calm but firm. "We live our lives. You go to school, play your games. Your mom runs her day as always. I'll handle them when the time comes." "But, Dad," Garrett's tone sharpened just enough to stop Bryson. "That's not up for debate. Your job is to stay safe, not worry about what I'll do." Shanice placed her hand on Garrett's arm, steady but probing. "You're not thinking of starting something, are you?" "That's exactly what they want, to provoke you." Garrett glanced at her. "I won't start anything, but I won't let them think this house is an easy target." The silence that followed was heavy, not hopeless, but preparation. Each family member adjusted to the reality that their quiet street wasn't as safe as they'd thought. After dinner, Garrett stepped outside alone. The night air was cool, carrying cricket chirps. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, scanning the street as he once scanned ridgelines overseas. Every passing car, every flickering porch light, every shadow behind curtains, it all registered. Shanice joined him, pulling her sweater tighter. "You're doing that thing again," she said softly. He didn't look away from the street. "What thing?" "The thing where you're not here with me. You're somewhere else, somewhere you don't talk about." He turned to face her, voice low. "I can't help it, Sean. When something feels off, I see patterns. I notice the small things. That's how I kept my team alive all those years." "And now," she asked, "how do you keep us safe without pulling us into your old world?" Garrett studied her face, the worry behind her strength. "By staying 2 steps ahead. By knowing what's coming before they do." She exhaled, looking at the porch boards. "I don't want the kids growing up scared every time a car slows down." "They won't," Garrett said. "Because I'll end this before it gets that far." For a moment, neither spoke. The street was still, save for a distant dog bark. Garrett placed a hand on her shoulder. "Trust me. I've seen people like this before. They don't expect resistance, and they definitely don't expect someone like me." Shanice studied him, searching the parts of him he kept silent. Finally, she nodded slightly. They went inside, but the atmosphere had shifted. Everyone knew the earlier encounter wasn't just odd, it was the first sign of a storm. What Garrett didn't yet realize was that the neighbors were watching too, and their silence would soon speak louder than words. The next morning, Garrett drove Bryson to basketball practice at the YMCA. As he pulled out, he noticed 2 neighbors across the street pause mid-conversation when they saw him, pretending to check mail or a phone. He knew that look, people with something to say but no courage to say it. When he returned, Shanice was tending her hydrangeas. A few houses down, Mrs. Callahan, an older woman with a terrier, froze when she saw Shanice, offered a tight smile, then hurried inside as if urgent. It was nearly noon. Garrett didn't miss the timing. Inside, Leona was at the dining table, flipping through notes. "Mom," she said, "people are acting strange. When I walked home from school, Mrs. Keating didn't wave. She always waves." Shanice glanced at Garrett, lips tight. "You think they know something?" Garrett's tone was measured. "They don't know anything. They're just scared. It's easier to stay quiet than stand up." Leona frowned. "But why would they be scared of men pretending to be the HOA?" Garrett hesitated. "Because deep down, they know it's not the HOA. They know it's something worse, and if they admit it, they'd have to act." That afternoon, as Garrett wheeled the trash bins to the curb, his neighbor Don Avery pulled up in his SUV. Garrett had exchanged nods with Don before, nothing deep. Today, Don rolled down his window. "Garrett," he said, voice low, "can I give you some advice?" Garrett stopped, hand on the bin. "Go ahead." Don glanced around. "Those guys from yesterday, they've been here before. Not just to you. A couple months ago, they hit the Hernandez house on Millbrook. Said their porch furniture wasn't approved. Scared them so bad they listed the house for sale." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "And nobody reported it?" Don shook his head. "Most folks here avoid trouble. The HOA doesn't deny it's them, and the cops don't step in unless there's violence. So people let it go." "Let it go," Garrett repeated, the words bitter. "And now they're bolder for it." Don sighed. "Look, man, I'm just saying, don't push too hard. They'll make your life hell. They find ways to pressure people. It's not worth it." Garrett's eyes narrowed, voice flat. "It's always worth it when your family's targeted." Don gave a half shrug, like he'd said too much, then drove off. That evening, Shanice sat on the bed's edge while Garrett laced his running shoes. "You're not surprised the neighbors stayed quiet, are you?" she asked. "No," Garrett admitted. "I've seen it before, overseas, back home. People see wrong, they look away. They convince themselves it's not their fight. And us." Shanice pressed. "What happens when it's our fight and no one stands with us?" Garrett looked at her steadily. "Then I stand. That's enough." Later, as the kids went upstairs, Shanice stared out the living room window. Across the street, a curtain shifted in the Reynolds house. She glimpsed someone peering through the blinds before they fell back. Watching, always watching. The neighbor's silence screamed louder than words. It meant they'd seen this before, knew the pattern, but wouldn't interfere. And now, that silence had spotlighted the Lomax family. As Garrett stepped out for his late run, he scanned the neatly lined houses. He felt the eyes behind windows, judging if he'd break like others had. But Garrett wasn't built to break. And while he thought the neighbor's silence was cowardice, he'd soon learn it also gave the fake officers room to escalate without resistance. 2 days later, the Ford Explorer returned. Same vehicle, same trio, but this time they dropped the polite facade. They parked across the Lomax driveway, blocking Garrett's truck. Shanice was unloading groceries when the men stepped out. The leader, Garrett now called him Clipboard in his head, for the board he always carried, walked up with a smirk. "Mrs. Lomax," he said, voice too smooth, "we told your husband about the violations. Nothing's changed. That's a problem." Shanice straightened, grocery bags in her arms. "What problem?" "My husband already told you your authority means nothing here." Clipboard glanced at his partners, then stepped closer. "It means more than you think. Families who don't comply usually regret it." That's when Garrett emerged, still in running shorts, sweat drying on his shirt. He didn't rush, didn't shout, just walked up, set a trash bag in the bin, and turned to face them. "You're back," he said evenly. Clipboard's smirk widened. "We said we'd check. Your truck hasn't moved. Neither has your backyard decor. You're racking up fines, Mr. Lomax." Garrett's eyes flicked to the clipboard. The paper was a generic form, filled in by pen, the seal a cheap printout. He almost pitied them. "You need better props," he said quietly. Clipboard's smirk wavered. "Excuse me. You heard me. That seal's a stock image. Your badge clips don't match. One of your guys' belts doesn't even fit. If you're going to pretend, put in some effort." The shorterman shifted, caught off guard. Clipboard forced a laugh. "Think you're clever, huh? Let me explain, people here respect authority. They don't question it. That's why you're the only one causing trouble." Garrett tilted his head. "Or maybe everyone else found it easier to pay you off than stand their ground. That sound right?" The taller man stepped forward, tone darker. "Careful how you talk to us." Garrett's voice stayed level. "Or what? You'll issue a fake citation. Scare my wife with empty threats. You've already shown your hand." The air grew tense. Shanice, still holding a grocery bag, looked between them. "You need to leave. Now." Clipboard ignored her, focusing on Garrett. "You think you're tougher than us because of that army past. Word gets around. People talk." Garrett's jaw didn't move, but his eyes locked onto Clipboard's with a sharpness that made the men pause. "If you know my past, then you know this is a mistake." The silence was suffocating. Clipboard tried to hold his ground, but Garrett's stare, calculated, not aggressive, broke him. Finally, Clipboard looked away. "Fine. Have it your way. But we'll be back, and you'll wish you'd listened." They turned, slammed the SUV doors harder than needed, and sped off. Shanice exhaled, setting the groceries on the car hood. "Garrett, what are you doing? You're provoking them." "No," he said softly, watching the taillights vanish. "I'm showing them I see through them. That's the only language men like that understand." Bryson, watching from upstairs, came down quickly, voice tense. "Dad, you stared them down like in a movie." "They looked scared." Garrett shook his head. "They weren't scared, just rattled. But rattled men are dangerous. That means next time, they won't just talk." Leona, listening from the hallway, whispered, "So what happens next?" Garrett looked at his kids, then Shanice. "Next, I watch closer. I learn their patterns. Because men like this always have patterns, and patterns can be broken." That night, with the house quiet, Garrett sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, jotting details, the SUV's make and model, partial license plate, their formation, repeated phrases, gear inconsistencies. His handwriting was precise, like old mission reports. Shanice stood in the doorway. "You're not letting this go, are you?" Garrett didn't look up. "Would you?" She crossed her arms, watching. "No, but I'd be scared. I still am." He met her eyes. "Fear keeps you alert. Panic gets you killed. We'll be fine, Sean, as long as I stay 2 steps ahead." But Garrett was about to learn these men weren't acting alone, they were part of something larger, and their next move would show how far they'd go. The following Saturday, Garrett mowed the lawn to keep things normal for the kids, Shanice, and the neighbors who still pretended nothing was wrong. Halfway through, the Explorer rolled by, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling. Garrett killed the mower, wiped his forehead, and watched as the SUV parked. 3 houses down. Clipboard and his men stepped out, no clipboards or papers this time, just presence. Shanice appeared on the porch, arms tight across her chest. "Garrett," she called, voice sharp with warning. "I see them," he replied calmly. Clipboard shouted from down the street, "Nice day for compliance checks, don't you think?" His tone was mocking, stripped of fake professionalism. Garrett walked to the sidewalk, steady, unhurried. "You keep showing up," he said, voice carrying, "but you're not fooling anyone." Clipboard grinned. "We don't need to fool anyone. Folks here know better than to cross us." Mrs. Callahan peeked out her door, freezing when she realized both Garrett and the men saw her. Clipboard tipped an imaginary hat, and she shut the door fast. Garrett's mind clicked, fear in the neighbors, confidence in the imposters. That meant leverage. These men thrived on silence. "You ever notice," Garrett said slowly, "real authority doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't circle houses, block driveways, or harass women with groceries. Real authority speaks once and is respected. What you've got is theater. Cheap theater. The shorter man bristled, stepping closer. You think you're smarter than us, don't you? Garrett tilted his head. No, I think you're sloppy. Your badges don't match. Your SUV has a new dent on the passenger side since last week. You're not untouchable, you make mistakes. Clipboard's grin faded. He glanced at his partners, annoyed at their lack of composure, then back at Garrett. We don't make mistakes. We make examples. Shanice stepped off the porch, voice sharp. Leave. Before I call the real police. Clipboard chuckled. And tell them what? That neighbors care about the street's appearance. Good luck. Garrett took a slow step forward, tone steady but laced with steel. Try me. I've got enough to bury this charade. The only question is how long you want to play before it falls apart. The tall man spoke for the first time, voice deep, gravelly. You don't know who you're messing with. Garrett's eyes locked on his. Neither do you. The tension crackled, a suburban standoff with curtains twitching in the background. Neighbors watched, but none stepped out. Clipboard signaled his men, and they backed toward the Explorer. We'll be back, he said, promising escalation. I'm counting on it, Garrett replied. The SUV pulled away, leaving a silence heavier than their presence. Shanice turned to him, voice low but firm. Garrett, you're pushing them. What if they bring more next time? He looked at her. Then I'll be ready for more. That night, Garrett pulled out his old military notebooks, untouched for years. He flipped through field notes, tactical sketches, communication codes. Bryson wandered into the kitchen, eyes wide at the weathered pages. Dad, are you planning something? Garrett closed the notebook slowly. I'm preparing. There's a difference. But Mom says, your mom's right to worry, Garrett cut in gently. But here's the truth, when you let bullies run unchecked, they don't stop. They get bolder. If you want peace, sometimes you stand firm. Leona, arms crossed, watched from the doorway. What if standing firm gets us hurt? Garrett studied them both. That's why I don't just stand. I plan. I find their cracks. And today, I saw plenty. Shanice entered, eyes moving from the notebooks to Garrett's face. You're not just planning, Garrett. You're already fighting. He didn't deny it. Someone has to. But Garrett was about to learn the fight wasn't just with the imposters, it was with his own past, the parts he thought he'd buried. That night, sleep evaded him. He lay staring at the ceiling, the clock's green glow washing the room. Every creak, every passing car triggered his restless mind. Shanice stirred beside him, as if sensing the brewing storm. At 3 a.m., he gave up, went downstairs, poured water, and sat at the kitchen table, letting silence press in. Memories surfaced, Kandahar, 12 years ago. His team pinned in a compound, outnumbered, outgunned. He heard the radio static, Sergeant Ruiz gasping after shrapnel hit. Garrett had stayed calm, found the enemy's weak point, and led his men out with cold precision. That same focus stirred now, in suburban Charlotte. This wasn't Afghanistan, but the pattern was the same: identify, observe, exploit, eliminate. Soft footsteps broke his thoughts. Bryson stood at the stairs, rubbing his eyes. Dad, you're up again. Garrett forced a smile. Couldn't sleep. What about you? Had a dream, Bryson said quietly. Those guys came back, but with more trucks. Garrett motioned him to sit. Dreams don't hurt you. They just show what you're worried about. Bryson sat across from him. You weren't scared out there the other day. Not even a little. How? Garrett leaned forward. You think I wasn't scared? I was. I just don't let it control me. Fear's normal, it's what you do with it that matters. Bryson looked at his hands. So what do we do? Just wait. No, Garrett said firmly. We prepare, stay alert, and when the time comes, we act. Shanice appeared at the stairs, robe tight. Both of you should be sleeping, she said softly. Bryson shuffled upstairs, leaving Garrett and Shanice. She touched his shoulder, eyeing the notebook. "You're going back," she whispered. Garrett frowned. "Back? To that place in your head? The one you never talk about? The one you left when you came home?" He didn't respond. She sat beside him, eyes steady. "I know you, Garrett. You think you can flip that switch again, but it changes you. It makes you someone else." "Maybe that's what I need right now," he muttered. "No," Shanice said firmly. "What we need is you, not Commander Lomax, not the men who lived on adrenaline and silence. Just you, the husband, the father." Her words cut deep, but Garrett couldn't ignore the truth. The men weren't going away, and his instincts screamed escalation if he didn't use his skills. They could lose more than a truck or backyard decor. The next day, Garrett acted. He drove to a hardware store in Rock Hill, bought small cameras for eaves and window corners. Installing them quietly, his movements were precise. Shanice watched from the porch, arms crossed, neither stopping nor approving. "More reminders we're not safe," she said under her breath. "Reminders we're prepared," Garrett corrected. That evening, he called Detective Miles Renner, an old contact from a joint training exercise years ago. "Send me everything you've got," Renner said. "Plates, photos, patterns. I'll run them through our system, see what comes up." Hanging up, Garrett felt a flicker of control. Shanice caught his look. "You've already started a war, haven't you?" He exhaled slowly. "I didn't start it, but I'll finish it." He stepped outside, scanning the street like a battlefield. Curtains twitched, neighbors stayed silent, and somewhere beyond, the men in the Explorer planned their next move. But the next time they came, they'd target Shanice directly, pushing everything into dangerous territory. It happened Wednesday afternoon. Shanice pulled into the driveway after errands, and the Explorer was there, parked crooked across the curb like it owned the block. Clipboard and his men leaned against the hood, waiting. Shanice gripped the steering wheel, heart racing, but forced calm. She grabbed her purse, stepped out, and closed the door. "Afternoon, Mrs. Lomax," Clipboard said, voice syrupy. "Your husband around?" "No," Shanice replied, tone flat. "But I don't need him to tell you to get off our property." The shorter man smirked. "That's the problem. You think this is your property. But in a community like this, there are standards folks like you don't always respect." Shanice's fingers tightened on her purse strap. She wanted to snap back but remembered Garrett's words, "Control wins." "If you have an issue," she said sharply, "take it to the real HOA. I've read the bylaws, and nothing you're saying is in there." Clipboard chuckled, stepping closer, voice low. "You want to play technical? You think paper and bylaws will stop us?" Garrett's truck turned the corner. Clipboard's smirk vanished as Garrett stepped out, calm, his gaze sweeping the scene like a chessboard. "What's going on?" he asked, voice heavy but even. Shanice's relief was instant but hidden. She stayed firm, refusing to look rescued. Clipboard raised his chin. "Just reminding Mrs. Lomax about community guidelines. Seems she doesn't want to cooperate." Garrett closed the distance slowly, eyes on Clipboard. "You corner my wife outside her own home and call it a reminder." The taller man shifted, avoiding Garrett's gaze. Clipboard's voice sharpened. "Don't twist it. We're doing our job. Families here know we don't bend rules for anyone." Garrett stood within arm's reach, towering without lifting a hand. "I'll tell you what I understand. You're trespassing. You've got no legal authority, no real credentials, and no business harassing my family. You've got 10 seconds to leave, or I'll make a call that ends this charade faster than you think." Clipboard's jaw worked, his men waiting for his cue. He wasn't as confident as he wanted to seem. Finally, he sneered, stepped back, and jerked his head toward the Explorer. "This isn't over." Garrett didn't move until they were inside the SUV, watching them drive off, body still as stone. He turned to Shanice. "You okay?" She nodded, voice trembling slightly. "I held my ground." "You did more than that," Garrett said softly. "You stood toe-to-toe. But this changes things." That evening, with the kids upstairs doing homework, Garrett and Shanice sat at the kitchen table. His notepad was open, more details scrawled. They showed their hand today, he said. They didn't care if neighbors saw them cornering you. That means they feel untouchable. Shanice rubbed her temples. What happens when they decide talking isn't enough? When they push harder? Garrett leaned forward, voice quiet but steady. That's when they make their mistake. Bullies only know escalation, and when they escalate, I finish this. Shanice looked at him, fear and resolve mixing. You keep saying you'll finish this, Garrett. What if it finishes us first? He didn't answer right away, just placed his hand over hers. It won't. Not while I'm breathing. The next morning, Garrett reviewed the camera footage. The men had arrived 15 minutes before Shanice, circling twice before parking. They'd scoped the street, noted who was outside, and approached only when neighbors were indoors, tactical but sloppy. Garrett filed every detail. Bryson wandered in, eyes on the footage. Dad, are you going to catch them? Garrett closed the laptop. I'm going to stop them. Like when you were a soldier? Bryson asked. Garrett looked at him, then at Leona, who'd entered quietly. When I was a soldier, my job was to protect my team. That hasn't changed. The difference is, now my team is you. The kids exchanged glances, not fully understanding but feeling the weight. Outside, the neighborhood looked normal, mowed lawns, porch lights, kids on bikes. But Garrett knew the mask was cracking. He was right, because the men weren't done. Their next move would be bolder, forcing Garrett to take the fight into his own hands. 2 nights later, Garrett sat in the darkened living room, laptop glow casting shadows. The cameras caught the Explorer circling at 1 a.m., no stopping, no stepping out, just slow enough to signal they were watching. The harassment was shifting to psychological pressure, a tactic Garrett had seen in conflict zones, where the target down without a fight. But he'd never broken. He called Renner. They're escalating, Garrett said, wasting no time. I've got footage. Sending it over. Renner's voice was steady. Send it. I'll cross-check plates against harassment reports across the county. Something tells me this isn't their first neighborhood. When Garrett hung up, Shanice came downstairs, robe tight. You're still at it, she said, exhaustion clear. Every detail matters, Garrett replied, scanning footage. The times, routes, how they park, it paints a picture. Shanice sighed, leaning against the counter. And what if you paint that picture and no one cares? Don Avery said it, the cops shrug, neighbors stay quiet, and we're left holding the bag. Garrett looked at her, eyes tired but firm. Then I make them care. I'm not waiting for someone else to fix this. The next day, he acted. He parked his truck angled across the driveway, forcing any blocker to stop in the road. He set a camera to catch the license plate from that angle. If they returned, there'd be no denying the SUV. Bryson noticed. So you're setting a trap? Garrett smirked faintly. Something like that. Leona chimed in from the doorway. What if they see the cameras and stop coming? People like them, Garrett said, aren't looking up. They're too focused on their performance. The more confident they get, the sloppier they'll be. That's when I catch them. At 6 p.m., a knock interrupted Shanice's cooking. Not the Explorer, it was Don. Avery, pale, nervous, glancing over his shoulder. Garrett, he said quickly, can I talk to you? Garrett ushered him inside, noting his jittery movements. Shanice offered a seat, but Don stood. They came to me yesterday, he blurted. Said they'd make things easier if I kept quiet. Told me they've got people in other neighborhoods, whole groups running the same scam. They force families out, flip houses, take a cut. It's bigger than I thought. Garrett exchanged a look with Shanice. So it's organized, he muttered. Don nodded. I wanted to say something sooner, but, he swallowed. I've got kids too. I've seen what happens when people push back, families disappear, houses sell overnight, no questions asked. Shanice's eyes widened. Disappear. They move out fast, Don clarified, voice uncertain, or so people say. Garrett stepped closer. Then you need to decide if you'll keep watching from the sidelines or help me stop this. Don hesitated, then nodded shakily. I'll help. Quietly. That night, Garrett adjusted the cameras, widening their view. He walked the property twice, noting sight lines, shadows, blind spots, movements precise, almost surgical. Shanice watched from the porch. You're not just protecting us anymore, she said softly. You're hunting them. Garrett paused. Hunting means anger. I'm not angry. I'm patient. That's the difference. But deep down, he felt anger simmering. At 2:07 a.m., the cameras caught the Explorer again, slowing to a crawl. One man stepped out, walked to the property's edge, grinned at a camera, and returned to the vehicle. The footage chilled Garrett. He replayed it, studying the man's face, posture, every angle. They weren't hiding, they wanted him to know they were watching. Shanice sat beside him, eyes wide. They're taunting us. Garrett leaned back, exhaling. Good. That means they're confident, and confident men make mistakes. But their confidence wasn't just bravado, their next move would shift to confrontation, and the scam's truth would start to surface. Saturday arrived, tension thick. Garrett had been up since dawn, checking feeds, reviewing notes, refining the plan with Renner. Every detail was set. If the men returned, the evidence would trap them. By noon, Shanice folded laundry in the living room when Garrett's phone call to Renner grew urgent. Miles, they're circling again. Plates confirmed. Renner's voice was clear. Got a hit. Same SUV linked to 4 compliance incidents across York County: harassment, intimidation, forced sales. These guys aren't freelancers, they're a crew, likely contractors for a shadow property group flipping undervalued homes through shell companies. We've been trying to catch them. You might have given us the break. Garrett's eyes narrowed. So it's a real operation. Bigger than you think, Renner said. Send the footage. We'll be ready. Garrett hung up, turning to Shanice. We've got them. Now they just need to step into the trap. Trap. Shanice repeated, folding a shirt slowly. I've set the cameras to stream live to Renner's team, Garrett explained. If they cross the property tonight, it's trespassing. If they threaten us, it's criminal harassment. With enough evidence, they're done. Shanice's hands shook slightly. What if they don't care about arrests? What if they're desperate? Garrett placed a hand on her shoulder. Then they'll learn what desperation feels like when it's turned back on them. That evening, Garrett parked his truck at the driveway's edge, garage door slightly open for a clear view. The kids stayed upstairs, TV low. Shanice sat by the window, phone ready. Every movement outside drew Garrett's eyes. At 9:47 p.m., the Explorer returned, stopping in front of the house, engine idling. Clipboard stepped out, face hard, smirk gone. His men followed, one with a flashlight, the other with a thick envelope. Garrett emerged from the garage, hands at his sides. Clipboard raised his voice. Evening, Mr. Lomax. We're here to serve notice. Last warning before we take action. Garrett said nothing. Clipboard continued, you've ignored citations, refused compliance, obstructed our process. You're not an authority, Garrett said evenly. That's trespassing. The men with the envelope tossed it onto the driveway. Sign, or else. Shanice's phone recorded, streaming to Renner's team. Garrett stepped forward slowly. Or else what? Clipboard grinned darkly. Or we make you move, like the others. Sirens cut through the night, faint but growing. Clipboard's eyes flicked to the street, uncertainty flashing. What did you do? He demanded. Invited friends, Garrett said simply. 2 unmarked cars rolled up, lights flashing. Renner stepped out, badge visible. Hands where we can see them, he barked. Clipboard's smirk collapsed. The flashlight dropped to the pavement. The taller man froze, eyes darting. Renner strode forward. You're under investigation for harassment, trespassing, and fraud. We've got statements, video, and records linking you to property scams across 3 counties. You're done. Clipboard blustered, we're contractors, with fake IDs, fake citations, and a fake authority no one recognizes, Renner cut in. It's over. Officers cuffed the men. Clipboard shot Garrett a venomous look. You think this stops anything? You don't know how deep this goes. Garrett didn't move, voice quiet. Deeper than you. But it starts with you. The Explorer was searched, revealing blank citations, forged HOA letters, a list of targeted families with addresses and property values. Renner's team bagged it all. Shanice stood beside Garrett as the men were led to the cars. It's over, she asked softly. This chapter is, gah. TT said. Renner clapped his shoulder. You gave us the break we needed. With this, we can roll up the operation. Garrett nodded. Good. No one else should go through this. The street quieted, but not the same quiet. Neighbors opened doors, stepping onto porches. They looked at Garrett with respect, maybe guilt. He knew the arrests weren't the end, a reckoning loomed, not just for the men, but for the neighborhood's silence. An hour later, the Explorer was towed. The men sat cuffed, shouting empty threats no one heeded. For the first time in weeks, the Lomax driveway was clear. But inside, the air was charged, the weight of events pressing down. Shanice closed the curtain slowly. It feels quiet, she whispered. Too quiet. Garrett sat at the table, notepad pushed aside, gaze softening. That's not intimidation anymore. That's relief, the kind after a fight's won. Bryson and Leona came downstairs, wide-eyed. Are they gone? Leona asked. They're gone, Garrett said firmly. And they won't be back. Bryson exhaled. You stared them down, Dad. You didn't even raise your voice. You just controlled it. Garrett nodded. That's what you do when someone tries to scare you. You don't feed their act. You make them face the truth. Later, on the porch, the street stirred. Neighbors whispered, some glancing at the Lomax house with shame. Mrs. Callahan approached, clutching her terrier's leash. Garrett, I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I was afraid. His expression softened. Fear's natural. Silence gives men like that power. Next time, speak, not for me, for yourself. Others echoed her words. Don Avery came last, guilt-heavy. You were right. I should have stood with you earlier. I let them win by staying quiet. Garrett didn't lecture. Now you know better. Don't let it happen again, not here, not anywhere. Shanice glanced at him as neighbors dispersed. You think they'll listen? They will, Garrett said. They've seen what silence costs. Days later, news broke, local papers detailed the arrests, exposing the fake HOA enforcers terrorizing families across counties. Garrett's name stayed out, but targeted families knew who brought the truth to light. Renner called. We're rolling up the bigger fish. Your footage was the key. Garrett said simply, good, and hung up. He wasn't after thanks, he'd done what was needed. One evening, as the sun painted the street gold, Garrett sat on the porch with Bryson and Leona, letting the moment breathe. Dad, Bryson said, were you scared? Really scared? Garrett thought, then answered, yeah. Fear's not weakness, it's a reminder to respect the situation. What matters is not letting it control you. Leona tilted her head. What's the lesson? Garrett smiled faintly. When people try to intimidate you, puffing their chests, pretending power, they only win if you let them. Stand firm, ask questions, don't give in to silence. Silence grows bullies. Shanice brought out iced tea, setting glasses down. And maybe, she added, the lesson is that the scariest battles aren't overseas, they're here, in our neighborhoods, hidden behind fake authority. Garrett nodded. That too. The kids sipped their tea, listening. The night felt lighter, safer, but Garrett knew evil didn't vanish, it changed masks. Still, for his family, his street, for now, it was enough. As the porch light flicked on, Garrett glanced at his children. Remember this, he said quietly. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You don't need fists to win. Sometimes, the strongest move is standing still, holding your ground. He let the words linger, letting them absorb the weight. For the first time in weeks, the Lomax family felt their home was truly theirs again. The moral is clear: bullies thrive when good people stay silent. Speak up, stand firm, protect what matters. Strength isn't intimidation. It's resilience. If you followed this story, subscribe for more, because tales like this remind us why vigilance, courage, and family matter most.